This episode of Warp 5 is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join in on the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode or any other, please join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
This is Mike Sussman, writer and producer of Star Trek Enterprise, and you're listening to Warp 5 on Trek FM.
How we doing, Trip? Ready when you are. Prepare for warp.
Course laid in, sir. Request permission to get underway. Let's go.
Welcome, Boomers, to another episode of Warp 5, Trek FM's dedicated Enterprise show. I'm Floyd Dorsey, and I'm joined by Trek FM Hall of Famer, Brandon-Shea Mutala. Brandon, how's it going?
Hall of Famer? What the heck am I famous for?
Yeah, man, you have stepped up. You started out as you were just a crewman on the side. You had a cot, and then we kind of got you a side station. Now we moved you to bridge crew. Then, I don't know if you noticed, but you were an all-star a couple of episodes ago, and now I had to step you up to Hall of Fame, man. You've been promoted.
Well, the way you started it sounds like a plague or something. You just came on and you just infested the show.
That's funny.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Yes. But hey, man, I'm just we've been doing this for a year, and that's kind of how it went. It just kind of rolled along, and we were getting going, and boom, man, you have jumped out there. You've been on all these other shows on Trek FM. You're co-host of The Edge, and you had Melodic Treks going,
which I finally finished. Everybody, I finally got that last episode out.
Yes. And I mean, you're just everywhere, all over Trek FM. So I've got to say, you must be a Hall of Famer.
Yes, I did at church last week. They had the Christmas special, and our kids were in the Christmas play, and afterwards they had a potluck, and before the potluck they had a pie eating contest, and I actually won the pie eating contest. So I have a medal upstairs. My kids were thrilled, and they were running around and telling everybody that I ate the pie faster than everybody else.
Represent Trek FM in Warp 5. Very good. All right, very good. So, Boomers, for this episode, we have got a treat for you. The Season 3 episode Damage is arguably considered one of the best episodes of Season 3. And some even would say it's one of the best of the series. I've even heard people say that this is some of the best Star Trek overall. Well, tonight we are not only going to discuss Damage, we're going to discuss it with the person who wrote it. That's right, Boomers. We are welcoming back Phyllis Strong to Warp 5. What do you think about that, Brandon?
I love it. I'm so excited. We had Phyllis Strong on a few months ago. It was 6 or 7 months ago, and we kind of did a brief touch of her career in general. We talked a little bit about everything, but at the end we said, Phyllis, we'd love to have you on when we talk about Damage, and she said, yeah, for sure. And well, here we are. We just covered it last week or 2 weeks ago in our Season 3 retrospective Part 5, and now that we've done that, we wanted to do a little bit more of a deep dive into this episode because it is such an important episode in the season, and it really is a game changer and has some serious ramifications for Archer in Season 4. So it's important, and it's because it is a favorite and because it is such an important episode, we really wanted to take some time and really talk about it. And who better than the person that wrote it, right?
Oh, yes. It's such an opportunity to be able to talk to the person, the fan, the person who actually she thought of this. She put it all together. It's just awesome. I mean, it's just a once in a lifetime opportunity, definitely for a Star Trek fan, I think. So, Boomers, we'll be bringing Phyllis on in here in just a moment. But just to let you know that we have an announcement regarding the show. coming up at the end of the show, after the interview and after our closing information. Be sure to stick around for an announcement about the show. On board the NX-01 to discuss Damage, one of the best and most loved episodes of the series, Brandon and I are very happy to welcome back executive story editor and writer of Damage, among many other episodes of Enterprise, Phyllis Strong. Welcome back to Warp 5, Phyllis.
Thank you so much. Actually, just to point out, I was a co-producer by this point.
Okay.
Not that makes any difference in the world, but I'll take the higher title,
Okay.
At least to that point. Not that it matters, and it was a long time ago.
Right.
But I just bring that up because I was both really in the mix on this one, and especially the core of this episode, the idea of what you have to sacrifice, how far will a good person go, where do you cross the line, and how do you choose to, was a theme and an issue that I've really been interested in for a long, long time, for most of my writing life, if not beforehand.
Very good.
Excellent. Well, there's a couple of points in this before we get to Archer's decision in this episode. There was a lot of changes to the overall arc for Season 3 with this episode. And in Damage, we saw the female sphere builder for the first time, and T'Pol had her Trellium D addiction revealed. So when you're writing an episode like this, what direction did you have when writing this? And when this was assigned to you, when the script was assigned to you, were there plot points that you were told to incorporate in the story, or were these all your own additions?
These were all my own additions, actually. I really pitched this. The only part that sort of fit with this was in the larger conversations we were talking about what would happen to the Enterprise within this fight with the Xindi and going to Azadi Prime. And if I recall, I pitched the idea that we would be severely, severely damaged. It's possible that was already up there, but really, I wanted to sort of take a step. I really pitched the episode that would examine what would happen damage-wise on many levels. And even though we had referenced and started and planted T'Pol's addiction with Trellium D, early on, starting with Impulse and even in previous season with her interest in being able to experiment with her emotions, that didn't necessarily have to happen here. But to me, it was such a thematic part of the overall idea of Damage. I really wanted to explore on all levels our damaged crew from really the start of the season, from the Xindi attack and what it was doing to us. And so it would echo back. So T'Pol's damage here, her addiction, was really, to me, part of the same overall story that took into account the ship, everybody on it, and Archer's sense of right and wrong, or not sense of right and wrong, as much as the practical damage to a good person who wants to do good.
Mm-hmm. So talking about T'Pol and the Trellium D addiction, was there any influence in your life or events in your life that you drew on to write this aspect of T'Pol's story? Because it's very similar to, I mean, it's blatantly like it's a drug addiction for a main character on our show.
Yes, and it certainly was something that, once again, didn't happen. It did happen maybe more metaphorically in the other Star Treks. Actually, it did get addressed, but not really so much on the Vulcan emotional level, and as much for one of our main characters. I wouldn't say, because it wouldn't be true, that I drew on my own drug addiction since I didn't have one. But I certainly understand the pull. I have been known to be a workaholic. I have what I I would laughingly call an addictive personality. I think at the time I was addicted to Diet Coke and various other things. And I tended to either go whole hog into something or stay out of it. So I certainly understood the psychology, and also the pull of wanting to explore something that you knew was probably bad for you, but you were so intrigued by. I'd say the other aspect that I took from my own sensibility, my own personality, is that belief that you can actually control things, that you can, as she said, I thought in small trace amounts, I could just use it to kind of juice the feeling without necessarily getting caught up in it. So I definitely could relate to thinking that you can, that even if everyone else has trouble sort of handling everything, that I could, let's say in my life, juggle everything and make it work, that I could juggle personal, social, academic, work, etc., and not give myself sort of any break, so to speak. I was definitely known as sort of the Energizer bunny. I definitely have done many things in my life where I have to pull all-nighters or you just go for it. I think on Voyager, I remember writing through the night because we had to completely change an episode. And, I just sort of sat there and did it. And I actually it was New Year's Eve, and I went to a New Year's Eve party, came back after 3 hours, and kept writing to hit the January 1st deadline for a draft of the script that I was doing. So that kind of intensity I brought to the table, and that kind of belief in being able to do what other people can't, I think is true for a lot of us.
See, with the Trellium D addiction plot line, like, I personally have trouble with that plot line in this episode here, not because it's poorly written or poorly acted. It's just that I have a tough time believing that a Vulcan would experiment with something like this when she saw the negative reactions, the negative effects that it had on other Vulcans back in Impulse. But I also understand that no one would ever choose to become a drug addict, right?
Yes, I definitely not choose to. And I also think one of the important things here is to remember that we are 100 years before Kirk and Spock, and 100 years closer to the Vulcans. We're pretty far, but from the Vulcans and all our yesterdays that come from the savage part and the savage history of the previous one. And also, I'd say that Enterprise really ascribed to the belief that Vulcans had emotions but could repress them, and even had to work at it to some degree, which differed possibly a little from at least what was on the surface in the original series and in Next Gen than the ones before it. And again, remember that Next Gen is 200 years later. So the idea is that they keep evolving. So we're slightly in a different Vulcan universe in this.
Yeah, and also you're thinking about it. This is before they recovered the teachings of Surak in season 4. So she's kind of lost. I guess it would be harder for me to accept it if it had been after they found the teachings and we're getting back on that path of enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it.
I also think you need to go back to Fusion, to I think they called it Fusion by the end, the mind melding episode.
Yes.
In the previous season, which was a bit of a violation. And basically it's a little bit like somebody being introduced to drugs, not of their own volition,
right,
and being not just tempted by it, but never would have otherwise. But I also think, at least in my conception of T'Pol, that she is a Vulcan, but she's not the representative of the entire Vulcan race.
Right.
And remember, she lived on Earth. She was the consulate there. She is the Vulcan on a human ship, a human plus Phlox ship, but primarily human ship, there are many indications that that despite her protestations, humans fascinate her. So a combination of who she was as a personality and her continued presence and learning and interaction with our human crew. And again, it's 200 years before Next Gen. We had a more emotionally available and out there and conflictual human crew. I think it's a little bit like when you're out of your environment and you're in some other environment, maybe I'll use my own, a girl hanging out with the guys, a woman who is working, in a boys club, so to speak. You start to sort of think more of the boys stuff is kind of normal. And you kind of gravitate toward even if you were not the tomboy growing up, and even if you weren't really frat boyish in college or something. So I think for all of these reasons, T'Pol individually as a personality was more susceptible to that, and had just filtered the Vulcan scientific curiosity through this prism of being forcibly mind melded with, again, at a time when mind melding was thought of as dirty and not done because these emotions, you didn't even want to feel them. And again, her background. So that's my very long, psychologically grounded answer for why I would believe that T'Pol could become addicted to Trellium D.
Plus, later in season 5, Brandon, Phyllis was going to write an episode arc that revealed that T'Pol's father was actually Rommulan. So that would have answered some things for us,
Exactly. But I mean, she is a fascinating character, and Jolene Blalock was evolving as an actress and really the custodian of this character as we went along. And if you just look at the differences between her in season 1 and season 3,
it's huge.
I mean,
it's huge.
Yeah, and not that. Once again, there were some big storylines going on in this, all of which were on the theme of damage. So it wasn't the T'Pol addiction episode, but for her to carry this, and by the way, as an aside, I had great fun with the sort of the fantasy sequences, her trippy sequences, so to speak, and she just handled all of it like a champion.
Mm-hmm. Are you referring to the shower scene?
I'm referring to the shower scene, yes.
Trippy? Yeah, okay.
I'm referring to the shower scene. And I do remember that as an aside, when production got the episode, and they were very good about it, but they were like saying, oh my God, a shower scene. And it wasn't, oh my God, we're doing a shower scene and how are we going to organize this? It was much more, we've got to rig up this this proppy set, because, it's not going to be attached to a shower. We have to figure out how to run a pipe up there and how to, make it go when we need to make it go, and have that part of it. I mean, it was all built and up there. It was an incredible production to get this, shower, on the set done. Right. So it was one of it. If you're always asking what's going to take the time, what's going to cost, the old thing about you never want to be working on the water, and of course James Cameron blew that up with Titanic. Well, this was our version of a little bit of Titanic. All for that.
Awesome. Yeah. So, like, in hindsight now, like we're going through this season rewatch, and analyzing it as much as we have been. So in my headcanon now, I've used an example of, Floyd, you're going to have to help me with the character's name in the episode, but the one where that Mako starts getting the neural pressure from Trip, right? And then at the end of the episode...
Harbinger.
Is it Harbinger?
Right, okay.
Okay, and then what's the Mako's name? I can't remember her name. Amanda Cole, yeah. So in the end of that episode, T'Pol basically throws herself on Trip. And so I've kind of used that as an explanation of the Trellium D addiction is starting to surface a bit more at that time.
I think it was running under, and once again, I think you can trace things back to fusion and the forcible mind meld, and to her. And there's always been, even from the beginning, this kind of, to whatever extent you can have a flirtation between a human and a Vulcan like T'Pol, you had a bit of that with Trip and T'Pol. I mean, it kind of goes from, sort of sibling-ish to something more-ish, but it was always a little bit there, even though it was never going to be consummated in any other way, but, through some device like this, which wasn't, completely conscious.
Now, before Phyllis thinks that I know all the trivia for all of Enterprise, the reason I remember Amanda Cole's name is because that was the second episode I was ever on Warp 5 as a guest, and I actually came up with a season 5 story for her. Like she was like an undercover,
cool.
She was like an undercover agent, and that's the reason that she was so chummy with the crew so quickly. And that was like if she had a return for season 5. So that's the reason I remember her name. So don't ask me any other.
That's an awesome reason.
Don't ask me any other trivia questions.
I mean, remember in all of this that what was driving the Xindi storyline, it was never stated as much, but it was always underneath in everything that we were doing. It was driven by 9/11. We were in the third month of shooting. The Enterprise as a staff started in, I don't know, May of 2001. And we had just started shooting, I don't know, mid-July. We were shooting the pilot. We just started shooting, an episode in like maybe August, and September 11th comes. And, this is the beginning of our Enterprise. So it makes sense, and then this is season 1, obviously, but it makes sense that and the world changed, so it made sense that it started filtering in, so that the Xindi storyline, 7 million dead, terrorist attack, it was a clear outgrowth of that. And once again, I want to point out how much any Star Trek series is a good, bad, or indifferent reflection, I'd say good, of its time. So we have the original series. We have Next Gen, which was really in a much more prosperous and, undivided time. We have Enterprise being affected by 9/11, and we have Discovery today being affected by just about everything. And I will point out that Damage is sort of a perfect fit with sort of what at least I can see as Discovery's ethos at the moment.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you near the end. I was going to bring it up to you because the Discovery episode, Lethe, really continues on with that trend of the Vulcans who are, they really feel that they're superior to humans and they don't want to be tainted by humans. And I personally love that. And seeing it brought up in Discovery really makes me question my preconceptions to Vulcans based solely on Spock and Tuvok, basically. That's really all we know. So I think that's awesome that they've decided to continue on with that aspect of the Vulcans.
And again, continue on with this idea that, wartime makes strange bedfellows and has incredible stresses on morality, or what you consider morality, and what you have to give up for the greater good. I mean, it's not quite the good of the many outweighs the good of the one, but it's a version of that where the greater good outweighs some questionable and maybe even morally repugnant tactics along the way. One of the historical events that I brought up, I believe at the time we were talking about Damage, but has always been a story that fascinated me, is the one of Coventry in England. Do you know this story?
I don't know.
Well, in World War II, you may remember that the Allies had finally, look at Imitation Game, had finally broken the Enigma code for the Nazis. And so we finally knew what they were doing. But if the Nazis knew that we knew, they might change the code, or they might alter things so that D-Day would not be able to happen in the way we wanted it. So the U.S., the Allied forces could not let any hint that they knew any of the Nazi plans before D-Day happened. Forgive me, I don't remember the exact timing, but anyway, the Allies found out that there was going to be a bombing run into England over the town of Coventry. And they had to make a decision. Do they warn the people of Coventry and betray the fact that they know what the Nazi code is and possibly put Operation Overlord or D-Day into jeopardy? Or do they hold their tongues and let many people die in a bombing attack? Guess what they did?
Yeah, well, I think it's not an easy choice, but I'm guessing that they decided to let the town die.
They let the town die. That is correct.
Wow.
And Coventry has become a catchphrase for having to do something you hate to do, having to sacrifice innocent lives to save more innocent lives and win the big battle later.
So they'll call that.
So that was the.
So they call that like collateral damage. Like Coventry would be collateral damage in order to set up.
Coventry is. It's a little. It's not quite collateral damage. Collateral damage is when you're going for an objective. You're going to Vietnam and you want to take out something. Mm-hmm. Like it's when the Nazis put all of their weapons in the middle of a church and the middle of a town, and to get them out, you need to do collateral damage. Here, it is a version of it, but it is even more because it's just innocence. That's it.
Right.
You are preserving something, but you don't even know. Think about what was going through people's minds when, something else could have betrayed the fact that the Allies knew that the Nazis that they knew the Nazi code. So, that was almost more of a gamble.
Right.
So it's a moral dilemma. And what I think Star Trek at its best explores are moral dilemmas.
So it seems like the season is kind of hitting a crescendo here, because this is like as bad as it can get. As the episode's ending, the ship is just getting hammered, and it's going on. So, how far in advance did you know that this is the story that you wanted to tell at this point in the season? And how did you decide that you were going to have Archer commit one of the darkest deeds we've ever seen a Star Trek captain perform?
I wish I could remember exactly. It wasn't at the beginning. I would say it was probably in the second quarter, so to speak. Not after the first initial episodes where it was the reaction to the Xindi and going on that and, all the little steps of trying to figure out why they did what they did. As it was building that there was going to be more of a sort of future Daniels kind of component in all of this as it got bigger. So I can't remember. My guess would be about sometime maybe a bit after Impulse, sometime when we weren't so much in the little standalone ones and we really started to pick up the serialized. Mm-hmm. I'd say probably came up with this 4 months in, let's say. So, I do remember because this was written, we would write from, like May or June into where we started the season, into like February, and finish up with post. And this one I probably pitched around October, November.
Okay.
So, it was something I was thinking about as we got deeper into the Xindi storyline. And we always knew that it was going to have some really big, repercussions, and, we were going for something bigger, but especially as it started to be, hey, the Xindi have this idea. They want they want to destroy us because they're afraid they're going to be destroyed. And as it got to be a bigger thing, that's when I was pitching it. What was probably given to me, or we worked out in the room, was the fact that they would be going for a rendezvous to figure out how to stop the Xindi, stop the weapon, etc. The whole Degra thing and the whole, little code, the fact of the rendezvous, which was the thing that drove Archer's desperation, was something that was planned out, was going to happen anyway.
Right.
But this was just the way that this is how it came to be within this story. But I don't think I pitched that.
Okay. And then having Archer go really dark. I mean, even in the episode when he's sitting in his cabin and Phlox comes in with Porthos, Archer's literally sitting in the dark.
That is such an awesome scene.
And that exchange with him and Phlox is amazing. Like, it's amazing. And
this is why Phlox is one of my favorite characters, is because he's there for the comedy, but he's there as a moral compass for people because he's experienced so much. And this scene just highlights not only how great an actor Bakula is, but, I'm trying to blank on his name here, the Dr. Phlox here.
Billingsley. John
Oh my goodness.
Billingsley?
How Billingsley, how great an actor he is as well. Like this scene is like one of the best scenes in the series, I think.
Well, they had a wonderful chemistry. These two actors had a wonderful chemistry, real sense of respect, and they both brought they were the pros. I mean, not that others were a little more green coming forward, etc. But these guys were the pros. And when you put them together in any episode, you had that combination of wry good humor and deep wisdom and sparring, whatever you needed. There were so many layers to what you got.
well, I even look at that, like I was watching it last night and I was looking at it and I was trying to remember, because it's probably been about a year since I watched this episode. And I usually do a rewatch about every year. And I couldn't remember exactly what Phlox was going to say. Like, I couldn't remember exactly, but I was thinking what McCoy would probably say, to Kirk. And I was looking at that. And when he told him, that yes, he's done it. For some reason, I knew that he had done it twice. I just remembered, I knew what he was going to say twice, that he had done something unethical. And then when Archer told him that there are going to be more casualties, and I was like waiting, I was like, I know what McCoy would probably say. I can't remember what Phlox says here. And then when Phlox says, I'll be ready. Oh man, that was like, okay. I mean, Phlox he's always been there to be that mirror for Archer, but then he's also there for Archer and for the crew. So that was just great.
Yes. I mean, you're making me remember that my driving passion in this was to push all of our characters to the limit, really get them farther than they'd gone. Whether it's an emotional decision, and again, however you think of the Trellium D, the fact that it was coming out here to really push to Paul to that point. Yeah. I mean, everybody is pushed to their max, and it was dark, and I don't think I would have been as pushing it as hard if we weren't in something like a Xindi, year and storyline. Not that it wouldn't have fit, but you wouldn't have had all of the circumstances. There were so many times, so many discussions of, how do you push them to the nth degree? What all has to happen? It can't just be that you need the warp core. It can't just be this. There's got to be so many can't turn back moments,
right.
in this. And such a sense that so many people would die otherwise. The real Coventry thing. There really had to be a sense that all was lost.
I mean, we don't just need the warp core. We need the warp core because it's going to save the Earth.
We need the warp core because we made this huge gamble in Azadi Prime to try to, while Archer's getting tortured, to try to turn Degra, to bring that artifact, to use what Daniels gave him, and doesn't even know if it'll work. And then to have them discover that, this little, that there's a code and a clue in the pod that sent him, that they figure out. And then they find the embedded coordinates. I mean, all of the gambling of how the only way was to change the sort of Oppenheimer's character. Degra was an Oppenheimer, his mind. So all of this, we're talking the future of the universe, if you believe Daniels and all this other stuff. Right. So, I mean, everything was hinging on that. If anything, I think I do remember, having watched it again last night, the one thing that bothered me a little, and it's just because of the constraints of our 43 or 44 minute running time, I felt as though the whole Illyrian ship part, the whole, actually dealing with that captain and dealing with how they were going to take out the warp drive, that whole thing, it felt a little choppier to me than I would have liked. I don't know if we shot much more. I certainly probably wrote more and could look that up, but there was a sense that kind of was a little bit too condensed for my taste. And I would have liked it to have breathed more.
That was something I was actually going to ask you, is what was your feeling about the way it was portrayed on screen, just the entire episode?
I was so happy with it. I feel so proud of this episode on so many levels. It came out, like I said, incredible in all the trippy moments, the poignancy and the emotion of, whether it's Archer to Paul, or Trip, or Phlox and Archer. Everybody was at the top of their game, and it looked incredible. So I guess my only point was that I wish there had been time for more. I wish we were on Netflix and HBO and had 52 minutes or something.
Right. So after 13 years of hindsight, are there any changes that you would make to the actions that Archer took now that you've rewatched it again?
Not to the action. If you're talking about the decision that he made or how he decided to do it, no, I don't think I would have. And I think I actually was just at a screening for Aaron Sorkin's new movie, and I actually know him and was talking to him a bit, and he was saying how somebody had asked him, did you want to go back and rewrite anything? And he's like, I always want to go back and rewrite it. I always want to do that. So, if I can put myself up there with Aaron, I would have, there were aspects, certain scenes where things were, well, we have to do this. They were very on the nose. They were a bit on the nose of this is the decision we have to make, and this is what we have to do. And I would have done it a little more subtly, or tried to do it with a little more subtext about how that decision was being sort of wrought, as opposed to just sort of pronouncing it. And I would have loved some more scenes to see Archer's struggle even more. I think that's when I talk about maybe not having enough time in that storyline, it's really to see that struggle that Scott would have done so well, even more. Whether it was with Casey Biggs' character, the head of the Illyrian ship, whether it was more with Phlox or with some of the other crew, we didn't have a chance to see sort of the reaction to what the captain was saying. When he's like, we're going, we're getting it, that's it. You always love to see the little bits of human reaction, even in a military setting.
Mm-hmm. Well, after rewatching this episode, I tell you that scene that we were just talking about with Floyd there, where we were talking about with Phlox and Archer, I want to know, what were the two unethical things that Phlox did? Like, wow, for Phlox to do something, woof.
That's something Dayton Ward.
Well, that was for season 5.
Right. That's something that Dayton Ward said. Those are feelers that you have out there. That's a story someone can write. That's a story someone can tell.
Exactly. That is the story. Well, and two, you have Phlox's reaction, in so many episodes to the things like, look, you could even say, even though I don't think it was that, but you could even talk about similitude and clone trip and all of that as things that go close to the line. You can also take Phlox's reaction to, I forget, guys, help me out on which episode this was. Maybe Doctor's Order. I can't remember, but the one where there were the two species, they were like Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal. Yeah, Doctor's Orders. And his reaction to what was happening there, is indicative of having to make a choice like that before.
See, watching that scene, I did immediately think of Doctor's Orders. I didn't think of similitude, but that would honestly be very fascinating if the two things that he had to do were while he was on Enterprise. Like,
oh,
wow.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you mentioned similitude there. Like, if the two times he crossed the line were under Archer, that would be deep, and that would be an interesting thing to get some, like another letter or something like that to the Doctor that he wrote to in Dear Doctor, right?
Wow,
so.
I assumed it happened before he came aboard, but holy cow, Archer's a really bad influence then, is what we're saying. Wow.
Well, maybe it's the other way around. I mean, those things happened before Archer stepped over his line.
Oh, true. Okay, so we actually had a listener we actually had several listener questions for you here, and like they were just coming in like, man, this is the best episode, and then they didn't ask a question, but thank you so much, listeners, for your comments and your questions. But Duncan Barrett said, were you aware how controversial this episode would become? Like, and what were the discussions like in the writer's room going into it?
I was, in all honesty, I was aware that it might be controversial, but when I pitched it, I got such support. And we really felt that we were a bit in this morally ambiguous universe to some degree, in the expanse, if you will. Now that I recall, I might have gotten some surprise reactions, but it was such a strong story. It was such a strong dilemma that I think people were pretty on board with it. I think also there was some concern, but it wasn't a prohibition by any means. And again, within the context of this season storyline, it was understandable. And all I remember is that I was really passionate about it.
So just kind of geeking out here just a little bit. The beginning of this episode shows, I think it's the Xindi, it's Dahlem, is complaining to the other Xindi about why are we allowing this ship to exist? Why are we allowing them a warship within our system here? And that they're here. Why aren't we at least going on board this ship? And I was thinking to myself when I watched this, he's got a really good point. Why aren't we taking them prisoner? Looking at it from the point of view, like a really good bad guy doesn't think they're a bad guy. They always actually have a really good reason to do what they're doing. Like the reason that they're designing this weapon to destroy Earth because they were told that Earth was going to destroy them. So from their point of view, they're actually the heroes of their story. So in that case, you've got the Xindi reptilian. He's like actually making a really good point here,
He is, and I think part of it is he would have if he had free reign, but it's also like your military, reports to its governing body or a council and other things, and there are so many parts of this coalition that don't necessarily want to use their resources to go this far. Because remember, they also have to safeguard the weapon in all of this. And they found, and the other thing too is it didn't seem like they were so much about taking prisoners. They did try it with Archer and they didn't get anything. Right. So I think to some degree, you don't necessarily, you got a lot of things to do. If you've bombed out the the destroyer or the ship, in the ocean during wartime. Right. You're not going to sit there and necessarily swoop in. You're going to let the Indianapolis just go. You got other things to do. You also are not going to, if you think about it, to actually try to go in and board and get those as prisoners, you're going to take casualties. And that's not necessarily a smart move. If it's so damaged, let them drift and die in space.
Well, I thought for him, he didn't really want to take them prisoners. He just wanted to go wipe them all out just to check that box. That's what I was thinking on him.
Yes. But also, to some extent, it's like, let's not even use the resources for that, because, when you go to engage, you may think you're coming up against a wounded a really wounded or vanquished opponent or enemy, but they could have some tricks up their sleeve, and they have nothing more to lose. What if they decide to suicide bomb out and take you with them?
That makes sense.
So it's militarily, it probably, he might have used poor judgment in that, but there would be enough factors and people arguing against him that was
right.
Probably
I mean, he was
not, just
he
let
didn't
them
like
die.
that the primates and arboreals were protecting the Enterprise at that point. They're like, we're in negotiations with them, and like, why are we in negotiations? We should have our boot on their head. The reptilian want to wipe them out, and let's go to Earth and wipe the rest of them out, and then when we get there, let's wipe out every colony. And he didn't like. He already saw the shift at the beginning of this episode. So, but when I'm looking at that, the actor, I don't recall the actor's name that did Dahlem, but he'd really acted that kind of like he was innocently confused at why are we not wiping them all out, So, yeah.
Right. And he might have been, or he might have been overtaken by his own hatred and hostility. And once again, in the novelized version of this, you missed his conversation, possibly even with the supreme commander and the allied forces, so to speak, who was saying, no, you're being obsessed with this. If he is the leading player in his own story, he had his own obsessions and damages that were leading him to make some foolish decisions. So that's how I would answer it.
So, Floyd, I'll just point out here before we move on to the next question here that the guy that, I'm pretty sure it's the guy that played Dahlem here, because, again, I watched these quickly, is Scott McDonald, and he actually played Tosk in Deep Space Nine's episode, Captive Pursuit.
Okay. That's nice.
Cool.
I like that episode. That's the one where O'Brien actually protects him? Right.
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
I remember it vaguely, but I would have to be, if you told me it, I'd go, oh yeah, but I can't, and I know the name Tosk, but that's
he's
about
kind of the lizard-looking guy who was hunted by the other race, and he could turn invisible, and he ended up coming through the wormhole, and O'Brien was helping him out and became friends with him and helped him escape at the end of the episode.
Yes. I said there was a warmth to that episode, if I recall.
Yeah.
Okay, so another listener question that we have is from Ronald Wilson. He said, great reversal of the episode Anomaly. So how aware were you that this was going to be a mirror image for Anomaly?
Not so much. What does he
what he's talking about on
Anomaly
is where the pirates...
It's the second episode of the third season.
Right. So the pirates come in and they raid the Enterprise. And now, I think Phlox may have pointed out, or someone actually verbally pointed out, maybe it was to Paul, do you realize that we're becoming the people that attacked us when we first got here?
Yes. The reason I answered as I did was, once again, at the level of pitching this as an idea and a storyline, that was not on my mind, because they're basically, in terms of turning them into thieves, there have been so many times in this series and in other series where, people have stolen stuff from us, so to speak. I just recall that I wasn't thinking so much of flipping that on its head as that came later in the, oh, hey, look who we are starting to be. Because just in general, the idea that they would cross the line and sacrifice somebody else for a greater good was larger than Anomaly and larger than the pirate ship idea. I think that's where I would say it was not a mirror image on that account.
I appreciate that, because the pirates are just doing it for themselves. That's when they were storing their stolen goods inside the sphere. Archer is justifying it. I mean, it might not be the right thing that he should have done. It might not be ethical, but he was doing it for the right reason, or at least he had the right reason,
I think it's the same thing as, you decide not to protect Coventry because you want to go do something else, or something that is benefiting you, or you're gonna move in once they bomb it or something. And it has nothing to do with sort of the larger issue, the larger strategic issue, and you don't have any qualms about it. I think that's the big one. Archer's process in this and his moral struggle is so completely different. If anything, it does hurt to say, we're becoming what we don't want. And there's also the callback in the episode to the, was it from Impulse? It might have been, or maybe it was another episode. Basically, when T'Pol throws back in his face the fact that, how can you be human? The callback to the, I don't want to lose my humanity, while I'm trying to save humanity. That whole idea that you do not want to give up. You don't want to give up what makes you human or makes you moral or good just to save the structure and the trappings and even your own lives and that kind of thing. So, and that is the real dilemma. And ultimately, Archer has to answer that for himself, whether he really is giving up his humanity. And I would argue that here he's aware of the slippery slope, but he thinks that he can stay on the right side of it. And I'll also point out something that has just occurred to me now, which is, I'm not even, this is one of those things where you write something, you weren't thinking about it, and then you find it and you realize it must have been sort of embedded in it and you didn't realize. Archer thinks he can stay, that this will be a one-time thing, that he'll do it just when he needs it here, and that he's not really crossed over a line where he will do anything just to be able to vanquish the Xindi and protect Earth. And that is the same kind of confidence or hubris that T'Pol thinks of when she thinks that she can handle the Trellium D.
And T'Pol actually put that back to Archer when she said, we can't try to save humanity without holding on to what makes us human. And she actually threw it up.
Right, and that was the echo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the echo of what Archer said
to her
earlier.
He actually said it to her.
Yes, yeah. Exactly.
Right.
Yes. And that was the callback.
That was a good one.
Yeah, so we have one comment before we get to our last question. Larry Bodian says, when Archer gets back to Earth, he is PTSDing over having to make some of the decisions that he made. And I'm thinking he should have gone back to find the Illyrians and give them back their warp core. And then Tim Cooper says, first of all, what a phenomenal episode. The first thing I'm most curious about is the lack of closure with Archer's actions. I'd like to know if there was consideration given to making subsequent episodes to tell the story of what happened to the Illyrian ship and crew. And if so, were there any potential plot lines being discussed?
In honesty, given the locomotive train that was taking this season into the big confrontation with the Xindi and the Council and all of the various races that were trying to destroy Earth, there really wasn't the luxury of the time to go out and figure out what was going on here. It was basically, it would have been too meandering, and you have to trust that this is, I think it's a really good point about the much later PTSD, because at this point, everybody is just on their forward trajectory. We did what we had to do, and we now have to win World War II. We now have to win whatever great war we're doing. And, it would almost be indulgent for the individual to try to assuage his conscience over what he had to do to win that war. Later, he can be tortured by it. Later, he might try to find out about it. And in all, I always thought that, I think it's Phlox said in the episode, it'll be tough, but or maybe Archer said that, it'll be tough, but they'll make it.
Right.
We are leaving them food. We are giving them this. They could, we don't know. They could have been picked up by another vessel or something going on here. I'd like to think there is the bad version where, despite the Trellium D that was given to them in their hold, that they hit a spatial anomaly and, were gone. And, that's a realist, that would have made them the real sacrifice in this. But again, like Coventry, it was something that Archer was even prepared for. And I probably did argue and was completely shut down, speaking of controversial, that, that we know that they didn't make it, that something had happened to their ship. But that was one step farther than anybody wanted to go.
So that kind of gets us to it, because like listener Greg Mullenby and many others were wanting to know if you had any ideas for like what could have happened in season 4 or season 5. They were thinking if we saw season 4, what if something happened in season 5? So for Warp 591, we actually had a writer's room episode where a Dennis Costello, he's a listener and also a guest on Warp 5, actually had an idea that the Illyrians,
Illyrian.
Captain's son, that his son actually arrives on Earth during season 5 to testify against Archer for the death of his father. And then
I love it. I was just thinking a straight revenge plot. And at this point, maybe we can make it the daughter and not a son. But yes, it would be a great story on the repercussions of this. Absolutely. And some kind of reckoning. You would even call it the reckoning, in this. And, perhaps the most critical, person, of what Archer did, to Paul maybe, would be the one who would have to save him in this or save him from himself. There's also the PTSD or / addicted Archer. You could also have season 5 where he's gone off the deep end because of this, and to Paul, with some Vulcan empathy for what that is, helps him through it.
Excellent. Well, right on. Thank you so much, Phyllis. Is there anything else that you want to talk about the episode before we finish up here? Any final thoughts you have on the episode?
I'd say that I am really proud of this episode in the performances, in the production value, in the moral ambiguities and questions that it raises, in a sense of real sacrifice and tough decision making that to me not only makes for good drama, but again adds that realistic drama, realistic emotional sense to a science fiction story. And I think that at its best, science fiction has great characters who have these flaws and these dilemmas.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Well, I got one last completely un-Trek related question for you before we let you
go. Here we go.
So, it's nothing bad. So we're recording this on December 6th, and we just got the news like 3 hours ago that CBS has greenlit the new Twilight Zone show. You excited?
Very, absolutely. I know one of the guys who's been developing it, so I've known about it for a while. And actually, the two series that I watched in reruns that made me want to be a science fiction writer and made me a science fiction geek were the original series and the Twilight Zone.
Nice.
And I will also add that one of my favorite movies of all time, is Planet of the Apes, credited to Rod Serling. So I'm completely on board, with the caveat that, Rod Serling is no longer with us, and those are big shoes to fill, and it's been tried before. So, fingers crossed that, with Black Mirror in the world and a real dedication to this, that will have something worthy of the Rod Serling legacy.
Well said.
Yeah, I'm so stoked. I'm very stoked. Right on. Well, where can our listeners find you and follow you on social media? And are there any other projects that you're working on right now that you'd like to let them know about?
Terrific. I'm on Twitter at Philly, Phylly Strong. And I am actually, I'm working on and have out there a terrific, I think I may have mentioned it before, but it's still out around. I have a great Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Robber versus Robber Baron story that's both started life as a feature and there's thoughts of making it a limited TV series, and there's also a pilot version. And it's a great, great script. And while I'm trying to find that one producer who will fall in love with it, it's also generating some heat. And I am actually working, I wish I could tell you the pitch I'm working on right now, but it's one of those things where details are being kept under wraps, but it does have kind of a monster feel to it. And it's also got a bit of a light procedural touch. So that is one of the things. And I'm also working on, once again, another high concept sci-fi thing with some time travel involved. So
is it the new Star Trek movie written by Quentin Tarantino? Are you working on it with him?
Damn. No. Although I'm liking the trailers that are coming out right now for, trying to figure out what it might look like. I will say that I hope at one time when I talk to you that I can talk about the sort of new space exploration series that I would like to do, which would harken back much more to the original series in terms of the character dynamics. But right now it's basically just, a few lines of thought and stuff like that, and a real passion to eventually make that a reality.
Right. So thank you so much, Phyllis, for coming on to Warp 5 again. You're welcome back anytime. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome, and enjoy. I'm so glad you liked this episode as much as I liked writing it. And good luck in populating an entire, season 5 for Enterprise.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was a really great talk with Phyllis, right, Brandon?
Oh, she's such an awesome guest. I love talking to her because she clearly loves the work that she did on Enterprise, and she did a lot of really great work. So it's fun to have her on. It's fun to have her on to talk about it. It's fun to hear her remember things as she's talking about. She's like, and she's like, oh, I just thought of this, and even years later, she's finding new depths to her own work and stuff. It's really good. It's
and
really
you can really hear her fandom of Star Trek, when she's talking about it. Cause I mean, she's, it was just the episode itself is just awesome. I think it's really, really good. And some people might kind of, well, it doesn't really look like Star Trek, it doesn't really look like TNG, or it doesn't really look like things. But honestly, I mean, it looks like Deep Space Nine, like really good Deep Space Nine. It looks like really good Voyager. The original series didn't really have anything like that during the original series, but then you got into the original series movies and it got into this, the serious, like the ship being damaged, the people being pushed to their limits, that kind of thing. And it fell in this part of the season. Like when we're watching this, as a series along, wow, it just damages something else. It's just something else. And it never really stood out to me. Like when I used to watch it just as a fan and just watching it, it never really stood out to me as being like, wow, this is an amazing episode. I just thought the whole season 3 just rolling along was just like she said, like a locomotive. But boy, when you take it out and you really lay this down, like the different scenes that you have, like we mentioned with the Archer and Phlox, and then with T'Pol and Trip, and then Trip and Archer, man, there's just great character drama and tension in it.
Yeah. Well, that scene with Phlox especially, but like what you're saying there, where it comes off as such a high episode as well with Azadi Prime. which has such a strong battle at the end of the episode. And I've said many times, like, I love that shot at the end of Azadi Prime when the Enterprise is just spiraling off completely and totally, almost destroyed. Like, yeah, we love that ship, but it's such a great shot and it's so powerful. And there's like 6 episodes left in the season. What are they going to do? So I love that shot so much because it's like, what's going to happen next? And then to have them follow up with this episode is outstanding. Because, yeah, we don't see our captains go dark, right? Until Lorca now on Discovery. But, up until this point, we hadn't really seen it. I mean, yeah, we got the actions of Cisco in the pale moonlight, but it's not something that happens frequently. Our captains are supposed to be the good people, and to have to make that choice between two evils, two terrible decisions.
The paragon of virtue. I always pull that from the original series episode. The mud.
I don't even know what a paragon is.
So yes, talking to Phyllis Strong about damage is not the only thing we've been doing on Trek FM this week. So here's what you may have missed elsewhere on the network.
And stay tuned afterwards because we got an announcement.
Previously on Trek.fm, Earl Grey.
Exactly. I mean, like Arsenal of Freedom, like there's plot A, plot B, and plot C, if you look at it. I mean, this episode really has a lot going because when I think of Arsenal of Freedom, I don't think of it as a Geordi episode, but yet we've just mentioned 2 really important moments with Geordi and him taking command and, building his character. So it's a great episode.
Stage 9, a podcast about the people who make Star Trek.
I mean, it's, there's a scene with a bear and Leonardo DiCaprio and, whatever.
As I understand it, it's not a pleasant scene. They're not high-fiving each other.
It's pretty intense, I wouldn't say it's unbearable, but it's pretty intense. Waka waka. Anyway.
The 602 Club.
For me, first of all, it only being the second Star Wars book I've ever read, I like the difference of having a series of short stories and not just one novel by one author like the Claudia Gray book that I read, Leia, Princess of Alderaan.
The Edge, a Star Trek Discovery podcast.
Okay, so I'm reading this really great book that I recommend. It's The Ultimate Star Trek and Philosophy, The Search for Socrates. It's a collection of stories from all different authors, and it's been on my bookshelf for a year.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out these shows and find out what we're talking about in your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad, Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they're published. And while you're there, please leave us a star rating and written review. And if you're not an Apple user, we've still got you covered. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, and in most third-party apps. And you can always go to our website and download the MP3 file or grab the RSS link. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. One of the best places to go is the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL in the search field on Facebook and join in on the fun. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. And if you'd like to send us a voice transmission, just go to speakpipe.com/TrekFM, record your message, and Brandon-Shea will add it to a future episode. And if you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select Warp 5, and that comes right to us. And if you like hearing what you hear here on the network, on Trek FM and on Warp 5, you can help us keep this all coming to you by visiting patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. You can donate as little as $1 and get in on the being a patron and helping out our network. You can jump up to $5, get access to the patron zone. You can get it up to $10 to access the round table. You can go to, or is it $15? 15 for the round table. So step that up to 15. You get onto the round table. You actually get to try your hand at podcasting. And if you go all the way up to $25, you can be an associate producer. Just like we have our co-associate producers for Warp 5 here. We have Mike Morrison, Tim Cooper, Justin Oser, and Mark Flessa. Thank you so much for being co-associate producers of Warp 5. And do we have any new ones, Brandon? It seems like we're always picking up new co-associate producers.
We also have Joel Saltzman, but, well, you do always forget yourself. I mean, you still haven't removed it from it.
Well, I've always been there, but we just add on names all the time. So if you want to join the Warp 5 team, just go to patreon.com/trekfm and get the details. Also, I'd like to thank Tony Robinson for creating the very cool show art for the shows, and Brandon-Shea for editing and publishing Warp 5. So thank you so much, guys.
You are very welcome, my friend.
So, Brandon, we've had Phyllis on twice now. You pull down these great guests. You do such a great job with Warp 5 here and finding these neat guests and the neat topics and everything. So thank you so much for getting that done for us here.
Oh, you're welcome. It's always fun to have guests on and have Phyllis on and any of the writers. If you're listening, give me a call and give me an email. Send me a DM on Twitter or PM me on Facebook or whatever alphabet soup it is to get in touch with me. You can just feel free to do that, and we'd love to have you on.
Sure.
Anybody. We love talking Enterprise. So
sure. Yeah. And I just wish that we would have had Warp 5 like when it was actually on, kind of like we have with Discovery now. That would have been so neat while everything's really, really super hot, to be having discussions. But it's still great to bring back the memories and to flesh it out. It's really awesome. So Brandon,
I just sent an email to the real Paul Stamets, who's the mushroom guy.
Oh yes,
to try and see if I can get him on as an interview on the Edge. So
oh okay,
I'm just waiting to hear back from him right now, but. That's email sent, and they got back to me saying that they've run it past their teams and they'll let me know their legal teams and whatnot. Because I guess he's got a big company and everything, right?
So, all right. So fingers crossed on that. So Brandon, if our listeners would like to contact you to talk about a little bit more damage, how could they reach you?
You can find me on Twitter at Brandon Mutala. You can find me here on the network hosting The Edge with Amy and Mike. And you can find me over on the Fandom Podcast Network with Good Evening, an Alfred Hitchcock podcast, which I host with my friends Chris and Tom. And Floyd, before you give us your contact information, why don't you tell us the news?
Well, the news, it's kind of a sad news. I've been issued new orders from Starfleet here, and I'm actually going to be moving on from the chair here. I'm going to be moving on from my hosting duties. My life situation has changed dramatically in the past few weeks, and I thought I was going to be able to keep it going plus this other thing, but I'm actually having to cut a lot of things out to try to fit my family's schedule and my life schedule right now. So I really appreciate the listeners. Thank you so much. Thank you, Christopher Jones, for the opportunity to come on to the Trek FM network. And it seems like I've been doing this for a lot longer because I've been a listener for many years. This has been a great 2 years that I've been on Warp 5 and been a host. Thank you so much, Jeffrey Harlan, for coming in and being a co-host that first year. Thank you so much to Brandon for stepping in, man, and helping me out this past year. Your editing and just keeping the show afloat. You've done such a great job, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad that you invited me on, and I'm glad that it worked out because, when I started with you, I came on for the commentary for Future Tense,
right?
And Enterprise was not my favorite show at the time, right? It was probably my least favorite Star Trek show when I started guesting on with you. But I mean, doing these episodes with you and finding these behind the scenes talents and whatnot has really really amplified my appreciation for the show. So I thank you for inviting me on as a co-host, and it's been a lot of fun. And my original reaction was like, oh, Floyd's going, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And so my immediate reaction was like, I might want to leave too. But I slept on it and I thought about it, and I'm like, I'm having too much fun right now, and I don't want to leave. So we're actually going to have two new co-hosts, starting with our next episode. So joining us next week, 2 weeks from now, I guess it is, we'll be doing the episode on The Wages of Fear, which is a French film as a part of our movie night, and Mike Schindler will be joining us as a guest, but we'll also be welcoming my two new co-hosts who you guys have heard on the show before. We'll be having Patrick Devlin, who's also co-host of The Briar Patch. He's been on several of our episodes here for our retrospective for season 3, and back in March of this year, he joined me for a couple of special episodes when I wanted to test the waters and see if I could get a weekly podcast out for you guys. So we released an episode every week in the month of March, but then I'm like, oh, it's just too much. I can't do it. So Patrick's been on about, 5 or 6 episodes of Warp 5 already. And Brandy Jacola is also going to be our co-host next week, and she's on Live from the Edge, and she was on our recent episode where we did the essential episodes from season 1 of Enterprise. So it'll be a little bit of a different dynamic, going to 3 hosts. But I think it'll be fun, and I think it's going to be interesting and intriguing, and I look forward to it. But again, I just got to thank you, Floyd, for inviting me onto the show and then asking me to be a co-host with you. I've loved it. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm going to miss podcasting with you. I think we had a really good feng shui going on.
Yeah, I sure, you're welcome on coming on, because I'm telling you, folks, if it hadn't have been for Brandon, my goodness, I could have received my transfer orders sooner. So I tell Brandon that every month.
Those transfer orders would have been forged, though.
But I tell Brandon that every single month. Like you've really helped carry the show on this past year. So thank you so much. And last but not least, thank you so much, listeners. Thank you so much for your support of Warp 5 and just for letting your Enterprise fan flags fly. That it really helps us to not just be talking into void and actually have listeners that also enjoy the show, but it also, just like we just had Phyllis Strong on, she is so impressed that Enterprise still has a following and has picked up a following, and just from our following from Warp 5. So thank you so much, listeners. So this is Dorsey signing off here. Boomers, thank you for listening, and join us again next time for another episode of Warp 5.
I just can't wait till we get the podcast where Riker goes to the holodeck and does the final episode with Floyd. That'll be a lot of fun.